Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, that is Eddie Vega.
And that is Chibi Orduña.
And this is Words
and Shit. Brought to you by the Blah 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 Poetry Spot and Write Art Out.
The show where you get to know the person behind the poetry. Eddie! Happy Mexican Independence Day.
That's right. Happy Mexican Independence Day for Mexicans in the diaspora.
Yes, all of us living over here with our fried chicken. So yes. Huh?
Just say pollo frito and we're covered. You know?
There you go.
Estilo Kentucky. When I lived in Mexico, we would say, because they'd have fried chicken, but they're not like breaded fried. And if you wanted breaded fried, you'd say Estilo Kentucky.
Estilo Kentucky. I love that. I'm going to try that next time I go down there, in 2021 when the world opens up again. Yeah. So yesterday was Mexican Independence Day, the 16 de septiembre, officially kicking off what is known as Hispanic Heritage Month or Latinx Heritage Month here in the United States for those of us in the diaspora. So for these next 5 weeks, because we have 5 weeks in this month, we at the Blah Poetry Spot and Write Art Out thought that we should focus on writers that are of the Latinx descent. And we did our very best to make sure that we had a plethora of cultures and ethnic backgrounds and countries of origin, as it were, so we could really get a cornucopia.
Yes.
Of poetry, a pico de gallo of poetry from all over the Latinx and American worlds. So I am so excited to kick it off today with a phenomenal, increíble poeta. Tell us about our guest today, Eddie.
We have with us today Jasminne Mendez, Dominican-American poet, educator, playwright, and award-winning author. She's got poetry and essays published by or in the forthcoming in the New England Review, Crab Creek Review, Kenyon Review, Gulf Coast, the Rumpus, and others. She's the author of 2 poetry prose collections. That's right. Award and Night-Blooming Jasmin, personal essays and poetry from Arte Publico Press. She's an MFA graduate of the creative writing program at the Rainier Writing Workshop and at Pacific Lutheran University and a University of Houston alumnus. Go Cougs! Her second young adult memoir, A Bucket of Dirty Water, Memories of My Girlhood, and her debut picture book, Josefina's Habichuelas. This is an awesome title. Will be released in 2021. And her first full poetry collection, Machete, will be released in 2022 through Noemi Press. There are poets, Chibi, that stay up like all night working. Night poets. I know because I get messages from them like at 1 a.m. But Jasminne, however, is part of a 5 a.m. writing club. Ooh. She gets up and writes at 5 a.m. You follow her on Twitter, you know that she's got a daughter, and her daughter deserves her own YouTube channel, let me tell you.
I thought she had one, but that's not the case. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Jasminne Mendez. Jasminne, how are you doing? You gotta unmute yourself, friend.
Oh my gosh, I committed the number 1 faux pas. I'm sorry. Hi, buenas noches, buenas tardes. How is everyone?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm excited to be here with you all tonight.
We're so excited to have you.
We're excited, yeah.
Because I believe this is the first time that we will have officially had a power couple on our show. Some would argue that Dr. Hensbo and Shadow from Southern Fried are a power couple,
but they were together, not separate.
Yes. We had Lupe on this show a few months ago, and now we have you, and I feel like we have completed the circle of life.
You're so sweet. Yeah, lots of folks say that about us, which is good, I think, and strange. I feel like, are we? Because like really our lives are very boring. We were like, oh my gosh, I would love to just like be a fly on your wall. I'm like, no, like literally 5 minutes ago, literally he and I were just like having Chinese and watching Parks and Rec. And I was like, barfing some like chicken and broccoli. And I was like, oh wait, what time is it? And he's like 6:54. I was like, okay, I've still got like 2 minutes. Fine. But,
I mean, that's part of being a power couple. It's this like idea of like sometimes we just sit in our underwear and watch sitcoms, and sometimes we out there changing the world.
That's right.
We try. Yeah.
All right. We are so excited to have you here today. So for everyone that's watching currently live on Facebook, please use the comment section. Use the comment section. We're watching it aquí. So if you want to show some love, if you got some questions you want to ask, you should ask those questions. You know, we will watch it. We will ask you questions. We will engage with the poet. Okay, be part of the conversation. But before we dive into this conversation, let's start the way we always do and just hand the show over to you so that you can bless us with some poetry.
Thank you. And I just have to say very quickly that I love the Frida painting sketch that you have in the background. I am coveting it right now because I love everything Frida. And so because of that, I'm gonna start with one of my poems that is after a Frida Kahlo painting. This is titled Self-Portrait, Negra in the Mirror, after Frida Kahlo. I write myself into syllables and accents because I am the subject I know best. Wear denial like a thrift store blouse, too comfortable to take off. Filter my negra into Spanish and translate the bitter fruit into something the world can swallow. I straighten my hair, dilute my rage, and subdue the magic in my hands. I slept while men mismatched the histories of me. I straighten my hair, dilute my rage, and subdue the magic in my hands. I slept while men misstitched the histories of me and my gods. I let self-hate lace me up into colonial ivory linens. I lathered the almost whiteness of coconut milk skin lotion and searched one day to find my limbs, a litany of hyphens surgically grafted to an improper place. A self-portrait I painted, a someone who wasn't me. Then, with a compact mirror of tears, I made love to my reflection and smudged myself anew. Repurposed the cocoa butter melanin that anoints my skin and bone. I stopped snipping my African veins with hemostat covered in blood. I crowned with 2 hearts beating beneath a burnt blue-gray sage sky. I awoke and blessed these 2 bodies till one blood ran into us both. If y'all could see the way that this poem is structured, you'd understand why I had a hard time reading it, because the lines are like staggered left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And so it's hard to follow. It was fun in theory to write it that way. All right. So this next piece, I am going to share, and I'm dedicating it to, I don't know if she's watching tonight, but to Adriana Salazar. There was like a Twitter thread thing that happened a while ago on rice and like loving all kinds of rice. And it reminded me of a time when Lupe and I were out with some friends when we could still do that. And it was after a poetry reading, a poetry event, and we were all together and we realized, you know, how like ethnically diverse we all were in the group. And we started talking about food, of course. And rice came up and we talked about how rice is like the most like, you know, beloved food in like all of the world, right? And we talked about how we all cook different rice. And so we thought about like having a rice cook-off, which when this pandemic is over and we can gather, we are going to have a like rice cook-off festival at the Mendez house. So bring your country of origin's rice dish, and we're going to have a cook-off. Because Lupe and I always argue about like, is Dominican rice better than Mexican rice? And so we have this debate quite often in our house. I think we're going to have to let Luz Maria decide when she's older. So this is my poem. I'm dedicating it tonight to Adriana Salazar, who was like super excited about the possibility of a rice cook-off. And it's called Bounty. If I can't return to water, then lay me on a bed of rice. I shake blue river stones and white pebbles in my palm. I shake rice in a bowl to hear a rain song. I let my fingers settle in the bowl, a memory of bounty and loss. I turn the grains round and round my knuckles, a fistful of what makes the heart go soft. They chalk my skin white, a saint, a cleansing, a dusting of what remains. I roll these farm pearls between my fingers, diamonds on dark skin, a starry night in El Campo. I add water to the bowl, slow and across, the way you might bless yourself in a cathedral. A rush of wet pebbles skins the surface. I rinse and wash these baby teeth of the soil. I thread the obsidian ones, the dirty rice, out. They are not fit for baptism. They are crushed seashells plucked from a bed of sand. Rice doesn't like to leave anyone behind. I drain the mulch into my palm and feel how it weighs with water and clings to skin. A second offering. Rice gives without asking for anything in return, and the earth won't take it back now. I spoon the blessed crystals out and toss them into the silver pot. The salt water whispers steam, a love song to my lashes. I listen as the pot hums. I look for what may remain of my mother's mother and her mother's mother and all the mothers I will never know. I watch as the grains of rice grow. All right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the one that was published this week in poets.org. People seem to like it, and so I thought it would be nice to read it aloud. But there is audio of it there, so, Along the Border. And I'll say just a little bit, it's in the About section, but I'll talk briefly. The inspiration for this poem was a couple of things, but predominantly on one of my trips to the DR to visit family and to do research and interview folks for the manuscript that I was working on, which is the one that's forthcoming with Noemi. We were just, it's kind of one of those days off, if you will, but it's never really a day off, I guess, if you're a poet, because you're always kind of observing and everything is can become a poem. And we were at the beach and we were, we were just there, and there was a group of like Haitian artisans that came by selling things, as well as like things that they had made, like lots of like necklaces and bracelets and leather things and stuff, and sarongs, and they asked to braid me and my sister's hair and all of these things. And within maybe 5 to 7 minutes of them being there with us, these Dominican sort of beach patrol guys came up on a golf cart and like yelled at them, and were just sort of being very verbally abusive and rude, and picked them up and in the golf cart and rode them off. And I was just so like taken aback by that experience and by that moment. And then I thought about the fact that, I'm here, this Dominican-American, basically just American of Dominican descent, who's here freely able to enjoy, the DR and the island. And my parents, actually, they moved there a few years ago. And so they were living there. And so I was visiting them, as well as some other extended family members. And so I thought about the fact that my parents could freely come and go. Yes, they were born there, but they've lived, they had lived in the States for over 30 years and then went back. And I could come there no problem because of my blue passport and enjoy and do things. And they, were from the other half of the island, and couldn't even, try to make a living there. Or if they tried, right, they were, they were pulled away. But then I also thought about the fact that I do live in Texas, right? And so I've been to the Texas-Mexico border on a number of occasions, and also have been sort of very much taken aback by that stark contrast, and just sort of the border politics, right? Of who lives where and how and who controls what space, and those sort of arbitrary lines. And so that's why I left the title very vague, because I wanted us to imagine that this could be any border anywhere in the world, even though it was specifically kind of about these two experiences. Along the border, after Idra Novi. On a dirt road, on a drive to El Campo, you found a bate, I cut the cane. We sucked on a stalk. You gave me your arms and I swam in the river. We locked the door, then the lights went out and the radio played. You fingered the pesos. I walked to the beach. We fried the fish. You ate the mango. I jumped in the water. We bought the flowers. Then the migrants came, and you bartered for more. Then the sirens blared, and they were carried away, but we didn't stop them. Then the ocean swept, and the palm trees sagged. They were foreigners, we were foreigners, and we lived there. Short, simple, and sweet. I'm gonna, I don't know if my 15 minutes is coming up, but I think I'm gonna read 2 more and save another one for later. So this next piece is in the persona of a Machete, which is the title, the current title. It's gone through many titles, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes through a couple more before it's actually published. But it's in the persona of the Machete. And this book that is forthcoming with Noemi Press has been a passion project, has been sort of one of my obsessions for the last few years. And it traces and looks at the history of the 1937 Haitian massacre along the northwestern border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti in the city of Dajabon. And this was during the Trujillo era, which is a 30-year dictatorship in the DR, 1930s to 1961. Rafael Trujillo was dictator there. And in this instant in 1937, he had La Guardia, his men, assault and murder Haitian migrants and Dominicans of Haitian descent, anyone whom they assumed could not or was not Dominican or looked Dominican enough, right? Who couldn't roll their R's, who had small ears, whose skin was too dark, or if you helped aid a Haitian from, if you shielded them and protected them, or kept them in your home to keep them from being killed, you could also be killed, right? And the instrument of choice was the machete. So they were literally cut and hacked, if you will, to pieces, many of them, unfortunately. And Trujillo did this so that it would look like a tussle between farm workers and not a state-sanctioned murder and violent act and attempted genocide. So in my book, I take the persona. One of the personas in the book is the machete, and this is one of the pieces. When he speaks. Machete, look, with an epigraph. It matters what you call a thing. Solmaz Sharif. It isn't easy to look at what I have cut, which is to say, wounded from the body of a tree, or a woman, or a child. Which is to say, lean in and over and learn to live without. Which is to say, want, a limb, a phantom pain, a cold sharpness where the blood or the blade remembers bone. Which is to say, map what I have done for war and for Cain, for borders and for land, to lovers and to home. Which is to say, look the other way. There is always more to see. And I will end on this one to try to end on a slightly higher note. And this one I'm sharing because I got fan mail this week from that poets.org posting, because it's shared to thousands of people. And so a few folks went to my website and used my contact form and contacted me. And there was this one from this very lovely woman who's currently living in Switzerland, who's a PhD candidate or wants to be a PhD candidate in education. And so from the Along the Border poem, she went to my website, looked at some more of my work, and she found this piece that I'm about to read. And she said it spoke to her as an educator and how to reach and sort of teach ELL students and bilingual students, et cetera. So I don't know if she's listening. I don't know if she'll see this, but this one's for you, Sarah. An abecedarian lesson for my bilingual students in Houston. At the beginning of each school year, as a bilingual creative writing teacher in Texas, I have to stand in front of a classroom lined with Spanish-speaking students and defend my Dominican Spanish, because their eager Spanish-speaking tongues from other Spanish-speaking countries forget that not all Spanish-speaking gente living in El Norte or America or Texas or Houston are from Mexico or Guatemala or El Salvador or Puerto Rico. I try to inspire them with visions of hammocks hanging between palmas and jacaranda trees blooming all year long. We practice words like guagua and quisqueya. I tell them my avocado island is ripe with chinola and cacao, and in the streets, language bounces buoyant from our tongues to the trumpets in our merengue. There is no slow talk, slow down, or slow Spanish. Somos negritos come coco, and there is always somewhere else to be, even in our mouths. Often, I explain, my tongue will roll out of breath a pilon pressing plátanos for mofongo before the meat gets tough. Quizás you won't understand me, I say, but Quisqueya is bold, red, a mocking hibiscus flower growing abundant, blue mouth waves surrendering molasses for Yemaya, where the sun opens una flor de mantequilla as taínos and tambores mark the beginning and end of time. It is un chin de habichuelas con dulce, un poquito de arroz con leche, and a vámonos pa la playa, primo, wave after a que lo que, tigres smile. Every year, when I begin to speak my Spanish to little boys and girls named Joaquin, Guadalupe, and Xochitl, they stop, turn their ears towards the distant country of my Spanish and ask, "Y maestra, ¿por qué hablas así?" And I always begin the lesson by saying, because my zapatos are covered in sea salt sand, and sometimes the grains get stuck between my teeth. Thank you. Music for Kenyon. Thank you.
Man, that was amazing. Especially that last poem, the seamless going back and forth between their English and Spanish, for one, in the reading. I noticed that. And we talked to Carmen Tafoya a few weeks ago about Spanglish poetry or bilingual poetry, or I guess that way in which we go back and forth, the code switching, within a poem. And I'm curious, has that ever been an issue with you, like with audience-wise, with people coming up to you and saying either it's Spanish or it's English, but it's not both?
I've never actually had that. I've gotten actually, pretty much like the complete opposite of that. Folks that, okay, let me qualify this. In public readings, MFA workshops, that's another conversation. But
yeah,
I mean, maybe that's this conversation
there either. So I'll say, so here's what I'll say. In like reading out in public, I've never gotten that. I've gotten the complete opposite. Folks are usually like, "That's so amazing. Like, I love it." And even folks, I've had like old white dudes that are like, "I didn't understand what you said, half of it, but I felt it and it felt good." Like they're just like, because I have other poems that have a lot more Spanish. I have a lot of singing. I might do that one. I might do one of those last. But so, and I used to get really nervous about that, but like I've gotten to the point where like I give zero fucks. I'm just like, this is me, and like some people are gonna like it and some people aren't, and like it's not my problem, and because I've gotten such varied and good responses from folks that are just from everywhere. Like, again, I've had this like man from Germany who came up to me, really thick accent, and and he was like, "I totally relate to your immigrant experience," and I was like, "What?" And so, and I think folks really yearn for it, especially like the young kiddos, like they don't get to see that a lot, and they're afraid to do it themselves because, again, they've been told like it's either English or it's either Spanish, and Spanish, it's not good, and I don't do it like frivolously, contrary to some people in my MFA programs believe. Like the words that I choose to use in Spanish are very intentional. And very purposeful. And oftentimes there's just not a good English equivalent. So why, and you know what I'm saying? Like the whole thing about like un chin de habichuela con dulce, like there's this whole thing about like un chin is a very Dominican thing. Like nobody, like it wasn't even until I like came and had like a friend here in Texas who's Mexican. She was like, your whole, she came over and stayed with my family and me for like a weekend. And she's like, everyone keeps saying un chin. What is un chin? I'm like, doesn't everybody use this? Like, and it's a little bit like un poquito. It's like un chin. It's just like like a little bit, like it's just what, you know what I'm saying? And so like you can't really translate that. And like it gives you the feel of like of me and my language and like what it means to be Dominican. And it's, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I've never had anyone say like, oh, it can only be one or the other, and not publishers either. It's always been very like I've been fortunate in that regard, I think.
So much to unpack there. But you're so right. We got a comment again. We're watching the comments, y'all, saying I'm not even bilingual, and I just love the passion so much. You don't have to understand word by word to feel it. So right on the nail. Exactly what you're talking about there. And you did a beautiful job of just kind of like depicting Dominican life, Dominican food in that as a very badly I've traveled a lot, but I have not traveled to a lot of Latin American. I've only been to Mexico. Tell us about the Dominican Republic. Like, what's your favorite thing about the Dominican Republic?
Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I feel like I'd be really lame if I said the beach, but it really is. But okay, this is what I'll say. So it's pretty much, it's the landscape, right? So the land in and of itself, right? It's not just the beach, but like these like gorgeous green, lush, like rolling hills that then like lead to a river that then leads to the ocean that then has like a mountain behind it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, it's just breathtaking, and it's beautiful. And it's so much, it's an interesting contrast, because I think even in that Along the Border poem, I kind of touch on it a little bit in the sense that like, I can come, right, as like this foreigner and really enjoy this rich landscape, but also getting there to these places, to these like hole in the wall, like these small little like rivers and towns and like, secluded beaches, you drive past a lot of poverty. Right. And so there's this paradox of like, this is a beautiful space. And yet like, here are these like 10 barefoot children who maybe don't have dinner tonight, and it's like, I'm constantly trying to like reconcile with that. And it's constantly trying to like, be like, I'm just like horrible American tourist here, And so, but I think too, I still do also see like a lot of joy in the people that live there. And I see that in my own family, a lot of whom do still live in poverty. And so it's, I'm constantly trying to like navigate that within myself, and just even when I'm there. Right.
Yeah. And then quick little follow up on that. Your favorite Dominican plate.
You can't ask me that. Okay.
I'm going to ask all our guests in the next 5 weeks those two questions. Just heads up.
Are there Dominican plates? You're gonna ask them your favorite.
No, their favorite, like, if they're Puerto Rican, their favorite.
Okay,
Puerto Rican,
so I'm just gonna have to say, because the first one is it's sancocho, which is like a stew. It's basically just like a stew with like chicken and beef and like plátano and like lots of verduras, and like we call them víveres, just like all of it. It's basically like, I want to say it probably came up like trash can soup, right? Like, oh, what do we have in the fridge? Dump it all in a pot, but like, no, it's so delicious. It doesn't matter if it's like 102 degrees outside, and if like one little drop of rain comes down, we're making sancocho.
Yeah, it's like with me and caldo de pollo. I do the same thing. Don't care. Yeah. Or my daughter says, I'll say I'm making caldo. She's like, are you sick? Is somebody sick? But, I was gonna ask, and because I've had, of course, Mexican rice. I've had some dirty rice. I've had Puerto Rican rice, but I've not had Dominican rice. Can you tell me what the difference is? Like,
So it kind of depends. So it is different than Mexican rice. Well, at least the way Lupe cooks it.
Yeah, because they're like northern and southern Mexico are different rice too.
Yeah. So I think ours is, I think it's a little more. It's more on the side of like Puerto Rican or like Cuban rice. So if you've had Puerto Rican rice, like it's very similar in the sense that like it's a lot looser. We're not like the big. Okay. Like we don't do mushy rice. We don't do, but like it has to be like loose grains. Like it's got to be loose, Yeah. We do a lot of arroz con pollo. We do a lot of moro, but not with black beans. So Cubans have their moro with like, it's like black bean and rice. It's like black beans in the rice, right? Like rice, like red beans and rice, like you might find in like Louisiana. But theirs is like with black beans. We don't really cook with black beans. It's all very much like red beans, kidney beans. And so we'll do moro like that way, or arroz con guandules, which is also a very like Puerto Rican thing, but we do it also. So yeah, it's like if you've had Puerto Rican rice, it's pretty much like it's very similar.
What color is it?
It's like orange, like my hair, like orangey yellow. Like yeah. Whereas like Mexican rice is a little bit redder. I've noticed. Like he also is a little bit redder, and like Lupe also cooks his like very differently than I. Like he fries it at the bottom first.
Mm-hmm.
No,
that's how you do it.
That's not how you do it. We've had this argument. Don't make me argue with you. But also, it's not so much about the rice as it is about the concon, which is the Puerto Ricans call it pegao. Dominicans call it concon. It's the scraped at the bottom, the crunchy rice at the bottom, which the first time my mom did that, Lupe thought he was like gonna die. He's like, that you don't eat that. Like that if your rice does that at the bottom of the pot, that means you didn't cook it right. And I'm like, that in my face. Like concon is the shit. Like don't hate on concon. Concon is everything. Like I will eat a whole bowl of just concon, like the crunchy rice. You pour some of the like beans like on top to like moisten it up just a little bit. Oh, some habichuela guisada on top of concon. Dude, that's heaven right there.
I have not had dinner and I am like
sorry.
I have had dinner and I'm still like, I don't even know what you're saying, but it sounds
I'm gonna send out pictures after this. Just watch. Yes.
So let me ask you, because you mentioned Frida, who's back here somewhere.
Oh my gosh, I'm totally jacking that. I'm gonna come to your house.
It's my mom did it. My mom's a painter, an artist.
Beautiful.
She has a few Fridas, and I too have a Frida poem. Yours is phenomenally better. Just saying. But what is it? Because again, you're Dominican, but somehow like Dominican-American. Frida was very Mexican, but she transcends that. Like what is it about Frida that touches you so much? Because you mentioned like she was an important figure for you.
Yeah. So for me, it was in the last with my last book, A Night-Blooming Jasmin. When I wrote that, I was very, very ill. I had a lot of chronic illness. I still have chronic illness. I live with autoimmune diseases, lupus and scleroderma. But that was like, when I was writing that book was like the height of all of it. Like it was really like I was in and out of the hospital and out of emergency rooms, multiple surgeries, also dealing with infertility, had a miscarriage, like all of that. And so I found a lot of my experience and a lot of my story in Frida's story, right? In her story of disability, of pain, of creating art to work through the pain, of telling her story and her experience through her artwork. And that's how I dealt with my sort of grief and sorrow, and how I dealt with the loss of like all these dreams, right? All this life that I was supposed to live that suddenly was like, my body was like, fuck that, you're not doing it, sit your ass down. My body was basically like, no, sit down, take some seats, and rest, and heal. And it was a very long time, for me to heal per se. And so I saw a lot of my own sort of lived experience in what she went through. And I just thought I see her strength and I see her journey. And I see that for sure in myself. And just like, she had her arms in her hands, but sort of from the waist down had a lot of difficulty, right? Throughout her life. And with me, it was, as you can see, so I have a partial finger amputation, partial finger, so like a deformed finger there. This one like a nail. So this is all for my chronic illness. And this is my dominant hand. This is my right hand. And so I've had to relearn how to do a lot of things, and I'm constantly dropping things, and I'm constantly, I can barely write by hand, which was my preferred way of writing poetry, because it cramps my hand, will just like seize up really bad. And so that's hard, right? If you're an artist and you can't use the body part that you need to be able to create art. And so I think that I just identify with her experience as well. And I keep looking up because I have my own Frida painting right here, and I'm like, oh, like it's right above. So yeah.
Wow, I love that. That's an amazing story in overcoming all of that.
Yeah, I read an article of yours. I think it was, or I'm not sure if it's an article or a blog post, where you were talking about. I think you were subbing in a classroom, in a middle school. Does it sound familiar to you?
Maybe I've written a lot of things about my
it was about culture. It was about culture and colorism. And I guess I'm wondering, were you teaching in a school that did not have a lot of minority population? You talk about ELL, but I'm sure that's like there's a minority population there. But was this something similar?
So I've taught in a lot of different places. So I, aside from teaching full time, I spent many years being a teaching artist. So I hop around to a lot of different places. And on a number of occasions, those places are definitely like PWIs, like predominantly white institutions. And I'm like the only, like, I'm like one of three, and the other, you know, two are cafeteria workers, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, that's real, unfortunately, right? Like that's the situation. And so, yeah, I experienced it even here living in Texas, right? As a bilingual teaching artist, bilingual teacher, when I walk into the classroom, right? Like Afro-Latinos, like we're a purple unicorn, right? Around here. And so when I start speaking Spanish, then, you know, they're like, you know Spanish? And I'm like, you see, slavery. No, I don't do it with the little ones. I do it with the grown ones, but you know, it just seems like I try to give a little history and a little background for folks for the children that are sort of really confused at how like a Black person can speak Spanish, and talk about being Dominican. And now I feel like maybe in the last 2 to 3 years, especially with like high school students and stuff like that, it's a little less sort of like shock, because you're like, oh, like Cardi B, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. It's a connection. Yeah, let's make it. Come on. Why not? You know, and so they have, especially with like reggaeton and more of like the music, right, and social media, there's a little more understanding of it, right, of Afro-Latinidad and Black Latinx and what that means and what that can look like. But no, yeah, I mean, I still for sure struggle with it, like having to like explain and justify like my, you know, my identity, my person, like my being here, and my speaking Spanish so fluently without an accent and speaking English without an accent. Like everyone's just like so shocked that I don't have an accent when I speak either language. And I'm like, because I'm bilingual.
I think that's what everyone's about. But do you think that there's like a different responsibility as a minority teacher or art educator or in a PWI? Like, is there like a bigger, like I don't know, a bigger role you have to play, or do you have to just let it be experience, their experience of you?
I think it depends. I think it's a very individualized choice. It's one of the reasons I did not last at one school where I was teaching part-time as a theater teacher. I literally left like 2 weeks after Trump was elected because I was like, oh, so Mr. Principal, you're not going to respond to my email about how we're going to address this nonsense? Okay, I'm out. And so yeah, I think it's individual. I've known teachers who are like, listen, I need this paycheck. I need my money. I'm not going to ruffle feathers. This shit's too bureaucratic. You know, like this stuff has been here since the dawn of time, right? Like this school's been here since like what, 1920. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they kind of like, they're there, and I don't hate them for that. Like, I'm like, listen, you got this job. It's a cush gig. Like it's at a private school or it's this kind of institution. Your kids gets to go here for free or for a discount. Like, I don't hate on that. You know what I'm saying? Like just your presence is already like in its own way a revolutionary act. Like the fact that you are here and you are teaching and you are in this role as like an educator, like do you, boo, you know? And it's also like, it takes an emotional toll to be the person who is like emailing or talking or trying to say like, we need to have culturally responsive text, or we need to have like more authors of color in our literature or in our syllabi. Like that shit takes work, and it's tiring, and it can be traumatic. It can be stress inducing, you know what I'm saying? And so I think it really, I think that sometimes the pressure can feel like it's there, like it's on us. And it's a matter of like, what you choose to do with it. Like, I don't necessarily expect anyone to do that labor, because it's labor and it's work and it's exhausting. And it's risky, right? Like you're risking potentially like alienating yourself. You're risking losing your job. You're risking like bad reviews. You're risking not getting letters of recommendation. Like it's a whole thing, right? And so for me, one of the responsibilities that I do take, regardless of whether I choose, because I've had different roles. Some schools I'm like, I'm going to like fight the power. Other schools I'm like, I'm tired. And can y'all just because I'm tired. So, but regardless of where I land on that spectrum, I always make sure in my role that I connect with and connect to other students of color. like especially the girls. I always make them know that my door is always open. I'm always here to listen to you. I will come and sit with y'all at lunch. I will ask you about your family. I will learn about your interests. Like that I can at least make change in that one-on-one level, even if I can't make systematic change at the school-wide level. Do you know what I'm saying? And so like, I make sure if I'm at a PWI that like even if it's just in my grade level or my department, like every student of color, like knows that I'm available for them, you know? And so that's kind of in one way too. Like I make sure, you know, regardless of if I'm like, I'm tired, you know, but that I'm there because that's what you're there for. Like, that's who needs you. Like,
yeah.
You know.
I mean, luckily, as an artist and as a writer, as an activist, you have found so many different ways to connect with people. You know, you write in so many different genres. You got poetry, you got children's books, you got memoirs, like, and then you have all these other projects that, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show. You and Lupe are a power couple. You've got so many things happening. I want to ask you about Tintero projects. You know, for those that are watching that don't know what it is, can you tell us a little bit about what it is? And a little history, like how did you guys start that? And
so Tintero Projects is, I'm going to say it's mostly Lupe's baby. I am here and I'm available to like, I help with all the logistics and like, you know, come showtime, I'm there 110%. Beforehand, I'm a little like, what's happening? So Tintero Projects is a reading and writers workshop series developed by Lupe, and then I was like, I want to do it too. And we wanted to showcase Latinx and POC writers from the Texas Gulf Coast region, but also from everywhere, right, nationally and even internationally, and provide a space for them to be able to read their work, to get their books sold, to share their current projects, to be able to build their craft, to get experience teaching workshops. And we provide these workshops and readings for free to the public. We do like to pay our writers either through small grants or our own pocket. A lot of it is our own pocket, but we do want to compensate the writers for their work and their time. And we've had collaborations with local theaters, Stages Repertory Theater, with the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, with the Holocaust Museum, with so many organizations around town doing collaborations and bringing poets and writers to those spaces to share their work to people who maybe haven't been exposed to poetry or storytelling or playwriting. It's a labor of love. We fell off a little bit with this whole pandemic, but we're starting some new readings, readings and performances coming up. We just had our first one a couple weeks ago. Our next one is going to be October 2nd. We have another one before that. You can check our website, Tintero Projects. You see, I'm saying this is Lupe's baby. I don't know a lot of the details. I just show up and I'm like, do y'all need snacks? Like, I'm literally just like, I plug it on social media. I do more, obviously, like I do contact folks and update the website and stuff like that. But
you're the soccer mom for Latinx writers.
I really am. Like when it comes to it, I'm just like snacks and cookies and wine and like I'll set up the Zoom call, all that sort of logistical stuff. And we do have a podcast. So the Tintero Projects also collaborates with Imprint Houston, which is a literary arts organization. And they've been gracious enough to give us space and time and funding for our fun little podcast, similar to you all. Like we just like banter, for a little bit, and we bring in a writer and we just ask them the questions that we have. We talk to them about their work and we just kind of like geek out on awesome writers. So. And
that's Inkwell Podcast, right?
Inkwell, yeah, Inkwell Podcast.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to change subjects from your project so quickly, but I can't help but hear in the background a beautiful child and a father that's probably chasing around the house for her. So your daughter, Luz Maria, is kind of famous, apparently.
Yeah. She has her own little Twitter show. I guess maybe we should get a YouTube channel. It just feels wrong. I don't know. I'd rather just like post little videos. I say she's more entertaining, and she's definitely cuter than I am. Because she's just a ham. She's a Gemini. People tell me that means something. She's a Gemini, and she lives with two Scorpios. Both Lupe and I are Scorpios. But we're like the complete opposite on the spectrum. I mean, we're both stubborn, we're both passionate, but he's like Mr. Jolly, gregarious, and I'm like, I don't got time. I got shit to do. Like, let's go. And I see that in her, like I totally see that and see both sides of that in her. But she's such a ham. Like, I can't even tell. Like, I think it's the theater in both me and Lupe, because Lupe and I met doing a community theater show. And so she makes all the faces and she says all the things. Like, I think I tweeted earlier tonight, like her new favorite phrase that I said literally one time is, claro que sí. Claro que sí. I'm like, you're 2. How are you saying like a full sentence? Like, I don't understand, and she's a little dictator. She's just like, siéntate, camina, vamos. Everything is like one word commands and you like have to do it, or, it's like, she's super sweet though. Yeah, she's great.
Well, that the Scorpio thing, the different cooking thing, that leads me to this question. What do you think is a bigger challenge? Being married to a poet or being married to a Mexican-American?
You're going to get me in trouble.
I know, right? We didn't ask Lupe any of these questions.
Oh, you know what? I should have read that poem. Maybe I'll end with that poem. I can't remember if I'm in my book. So I wrote a whole poem about it in my last book. When you marry a Mexican-American. Literally the title of the poem. What's harder? I don't know if they're hard. I mean, they're the same person. So. Okay,
well then let's change it. What's a better blessing?
I think the Mexican-American part, because, and now I'm going to cry because his mom is still in the hospital, recovering. Because his family just like, they're my family. Like from the day that I stepped foot into his house and he introduced me as his girlfriend, like they was just, warm and welcoming. And like, I've known, his parents as long as I've known him, for 15 years. And, his dad jokes, and his family in Mexico jokes, but they're like, if you leave her, she's welcome here. You're not, like, like it's that whole like situation. And we go to Mexico and like, they just, and I was scared. Like, I really thought that, this small little pueblecito in Mexico, like they've never seen, like, they probably have seen like 2 Black people. They were probably all on TV, like, are they going to like be racist towards, like, I was really nervous the first time I went to Jalisco in Guadalajara. And I thought that, there was going to be some like shunning of me because of my skin color. And it was like the complete opposite. His grandfather was like, your skin is so beautiful. It looks like mine, looks like mine when I'm out in the sun for too long. He was very like gracious, and like his cousins and his aunts were like, let's paint your nails and let's take you for tacos. And like, it just became this whole other family, and like, just so full of warmth. And, and his mom and his dad have always been so kind and generous. And so I think like for me, that's like the biggest like blessing, just to be able to feel like fully. And not a lot of people have that, like even in Latino families, like not everybody loves their in-laws, but like I love my in-laws, So, and the poet part, I think, is also a blessing because we get to talk, shop. Although we both kind of hate the way that each other does it. So, like where I give like really like critical feedback, and he's like, you're awesome. Your work is fire. And I'm like, that's not helpful. Like, and so we kind of, I've learned to adjust to be like, I tell him all the good things first. And then I'm like, but what do you think, like rework this line, so I've learned to like kind of switch my tactics so he doesn't like shut down.
But are there poem Post-it notes throughout the house? That's what we want to know.
No. Why would there be?
Oh, okay.
I put Post-it notes in his lunch when he used to go to work. I put little Post-it notes, like, Oh, you were referencing that William Carlos Williams poem?
No, I am not. But now
okay.
Look it up. I'm just wondering.
I'm just thinking like, I think it's a Mexican thing where like just Post-it notes everywhere, like little notes left all around. But I totally relate to that whole feedback thing, because every time I go to my husband with like, "Ooh, I just wrote this poem," and I read to him, he's like, "I like it, but blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "I really just needed you to tell me it was wonderful," but at the same time, the criticism, the feedback, like, is so important, right, in order to grow, right? So it is so wonderful that you have that. And speaking of you and Lupe have a show coming up, do you not?
So we do-ish. It might be postponed. It's still going to happen. Well, it's just so his mom was diagnosed with COVID about 2 weeks ago, and so she's been in the hospital, and so we just like getting it all together is just like not happened at the pace that we had hoped. And so, but tentatively, we will have a show at some point in the near future called Domexicated, Dominican and Mexican. And it's basically our love story with poetry and sort of short essays and skits interwoven in between. And we've told this story like a million times. So finally we were like, well, let's just make it a thing. And we have poems that are kind of like that work with each other. And they're also like response poems. Like I'll have written a poem and then he'll be like, oh, and he'll write a response to, you know, the poem that I wrote about a thing. And so we're hoping to like combine all of that and make it a nice, fun show. So everybody knows kind of, and, you know, kind of tells the history of our relationship, right? From courting and dating to, you know, getting engaged in marriage and trying for a baby and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
And that's happening through Stages.
Stages Repertory Theater, yeah. So what they're doing is they're having the folks go in. We would go into this theater, just us and like the camera crew, and they would film us like, you know, on stage doing our thing, sort of edit it, cut it, and then like, you know, post it for folks to see. So it is going to happen. It may not be sort of in the timeline that originally.
Yeah. And then you talked earlier about being part of that poem a day from poets.org. And that you all of a sudden got all this fan mail. I saw that. I mean,
okay, granted, it was only like 4 emails, but for someone who gets like, you know, 1 a year, I was like, what is all this? Like, what is happening? You know? Sorry, you had a question.
No, that was it. It was like, what stood out about those? Like, was there anything like really like off the wall? You're like, what? Really? Like,
no, it was all really like generous, kind, just you know, folks thanking me for the piece. And you know, one gentleman who was like, you know, I never reach out to poets, but like your poem really moved me, so I felt like compelled to like write you a note. And then I responded back, you know, just a quick like, thank you, that means a lot, you know, appreciate you, I'm glad like poetry brought you some light during these dark times. And he like wrote back and was like, oh my God, I never expected you to answer me back. This is something that gives me like so excited. I'm on my way to my, you know, my writing workshop class, and this just made me feel so good. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like, you know, who would have known? And then the one lady who lives in Switzerland, she literally gave me like her whole like life story. And, you know, I read it and I was like, wow, I feel connected to her. And so it was just really nice to know that like something like that, you know, is like my writing is like reaching out to folks. But yeah, I was kind of like, because I have another friend who she often talks about all the emails that she gets after she publishes a poem. And I'm like, people do that? Like, people are emailing you after you write a poem? like really? And so then when it happened, I was like, oh, wow, this is actually like a thing. But it was all kind. It was nothing like creepy or mean, or like, I actually was expecting somebody to be like, we need to build a wall. You know, like I was like, expecting some sort of like, you know, xenophobic, fascist, racist, like something to pop into my inbox. But I didn't. So that was nice.
I don't want to like stereotype people, but I'm not sure, well, that the wall builder types read poems.
I was going to say it's poets.org, not YouTube.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
I think they should read more poems personally, but
probably. I concur.
Just saying. But there's definitely a lot of love for it. We've got, Jasmine, love that poem. The show's going to be dope. Can't wait. Whenever you choose to and are able to present it, it's actually going to explode. Also, Lupe doesn't use any type of adobo in his rice, so
he doesn't. We have had this conversation.
So you have been a very lauded and multi-published page poet. You also are a stage poet as well as have a background in theater. I'm going to ask you, which do you love more, the page or the stage?
Ooh.
You get all the questions.
I'm a Gemini, so you know it's the whole like having to choose between two things. I can't do it, so I love watching somebody else try.
Right. So interestingly enough, that's a good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Because for a while, so I like left theater. So after I was really sick and like chronically ill for a long time, I left theater because it was just physically difficult for me to perform. It was just very hard to be like in a show, like a full production, you know, with rehearsals 4 hours a night for 4 weeks. And then, you know, 4 weeks of shows, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Like I was like, I can't, my body cannot do this. So I left theater. There were other reasons too, mainly like Houston's racist theater scene, and like they just weren't producing plays for people like me. It's changing slowly. But so I was like, I'm not going to keep wasting my time. So I left theater, but I'd always done poetry. I did performance poetry, a little bit of slam. So like, let me do that. Like, it's a nice combo of like, I get to tell the story. I'm telling, you know, I'm writing it. I get to put myself on stage, etc. And so for a long time, I like performance was my thing, was like my baby. That's what was my driving passion for like middle school through like mid 20s. And then I was on a lot of medication for a lot of different things that just basically like made it impossible for me to like remember anything, like memorize shit. Like my brain was just foggy. I was in constant brain fog. And it kind of wrecked me in the sense that I just was so afraid of like even trying to like memorize anything and be on stage, poetry or otherwise. And I still don't. Like, I think there's still some like, yeah, I kind of waver on that. So I will say that because of all of that, I really love writing so much more now than performance. Like, I'll perform if I like have to, but it's just like, I don't know that my heart's as into it, right? Like, I can totally fake it, but my heart is so much more into the writing. And I like reading aloud what I write, but I don't necessarily have the same like drive to like perform it. And when I wrote like my first play and had other people perform my words, dude, I don't know how playwrights aren't ego tripping all the time. Like, the whole process, I had to be like, stay humble, because I was literally like, yeah, that's my words. You know, like, it was so much like, it was like so hard to be, you know, like, you just have to really like check yourself. Like, yes, they're performing your work, but like, you know, I don't know. It's just like a weird feeling to be like my words in other people's mouths. You know what I mean? Like, it was a whole thing. So I love being a playwright. And so that combines like, you know, that performance and writing part of it. But I think the last thing I'll say is I think that I really enjoy teaching performance. Maybe a little more than even teaching writing. I like teaching writing, but I think I really enjoy, especially with you, like young, like adults, like young teens. I love being in like a theater workshop and like working with them. That's a lot of fun.
So you wrote the play. Did you direct it too?
No. It was a playwriting workshop with stages for the Latinx Sin Muros Festival. And I was in the room, though. I was in the room with the director and with the actors. So it was like a workshop setting, you know, similar to if you do like a creative writing workshop. With a playwriting workshop, you have like actual actors there. You can kind of like revise and rework lines if you feel like it's not working once you hear it, you know, with the actors. And the director totally like shapes it into sort of their vision. But me as a playwright, I was in the room, and it was nice to see that.
Well, I guess that was my question. Like, what's it like to have it be out there and then maybe it being shaped into something that you didn't envision?
I mean, I think that's the risk you take, and that's like the beauty and the joy of it too, right? Like, I would love, since right now it's still a play that's in definitely still in production. It's still like, it's not fully realized. There's gonna be another reading of it, a virtual reading of this same play coming up in October in a couple weeks. And I love that. I think, and just like even with like when you write something for the page, folks are going to interpret and analyze and think about things that you were like, that's not what okay. You know, like, I guess that's what you thought that was. And that's fine, right? Like, you can't control how another artist or another person is going to interpret or receive your work. And I think for me, like, as long as someone doesn't use my work, like in a way that's like, right, like to spread hate or to do something that I really was just like, that's not what I'm here for, you know, then I'm excited. I'm excited to see what others can do with what I've written. I think it's a risk you take in it, but I still think it's fun, and why not?
Just like you can't control your child. You may have created it.
You put it out, put the child out.
Yeah. It goes into the world and makes its own choices.
Well, Jasmine, I want to thank you because this has been phenomenally entertaining, insightful, and hunger-inducing. Educating. Yeah. I think we've both known Lupe for a while, but this is my first time really having, you know, a conversation with you and like really getting to know you. And I feel like we did. We totally got to know you. I want to make rice.
I want to make rice now, different style.
I know. I'll have to send you a recipe.
Yeah. We got to know the person behind the poetry, and I absolutely love it. So thank you for this conversation. If you could please do us the honor of closing us out with one more poem.
I will. So I'm going to end with this piece. To an hombre dominicano who told me it was not my place to write about Dominican-Haitian relations, after Lorna di Cervantes and Rosebud Ben Oni. My body is a midnight church, and when the blue of your mouth broke open a black estuary depositing soiled slurs and sediment, frothing feral words kept you from being forgotten. Your tongue lashed shame into submission, so I would know you were a proud man, like my father. Shaking your hands in your head, a machete, striking blows against my resistance when I tried to explain that my poetry was for women. Martyred by men they disagreed with, women. For 27 de febrero en la Puerta del Conde, women. For anti-dictatorship, viva la revolución, si se puede, women. For la guerra de 1965, fuera con los Yankees, women. For teachers and students, poets and writers, activists, women. And then esos gringos y el haitiano sullied out of your bullhorn mouth like volcanic rocks ejected from a fallow burning field, and false idol monuments erected in the town square in honor of la patria. Again, I tried to justify that my poetry was for women, amas de casa bearing rifles and marching in skirts, women, for chanting in verse to deliver their boys from exile, women, for red moon buzzing butterfly assassin, women, for sharp tongue, cracked tooth, camouflage, combat boots, women, for pregnant resistance and fighting womb relic, women, for the type of woman I was before you, fissured your fleshy mouth open and ruptured hot, marked your own territory with a stream of words that muddied my tongue and pursed my lips shut until I crawled inside my midnight church and plucked red, orange, pomegranate, and pale pink roses from my cheeks, and I laced them into a bulletproof crown of words on my head in memory of the women who are more than a talking head statue in the center of an abandoned park where the men like you go to weep. Thank you.
Absolutely. You definitely need to go back and look at the comments because people are just snaps, God, work, hearts.
Hearts.
All the love.
Love
it. I teach in all-girls high school, and I'm gonna need a copy of that last poem.
Yeah, for sure.
For my speech kids, especially.
Yeah, I get tongue-tied. I'm like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. If anyone is interested in finding more of Jasminne's work, you can definitely do so on her website, jasminnemendez.com. That's Jasmine with 2 N's and an E.
I am not the other Jasmine with 1 N. She does things I don't do. Totally respect her. That's just not my life. Just saying.
J-A-S.
All right.
Yeah.
JASMINNEMENDEZ, jasminnemendez.com. That's where you can find copies of Jasminne's work as well as links to purchase her merchandise. Follow her on Instagram and Twitter at the same handles, Jasminne Mendez. And, you can tip her. Tip the poet. If we had a hat, we'd pass it. Actually, we don't pass around a hat. We pass around a Kermit lunchbox, which is somewhere in my house right now. But yeah, tip the poet. Oh, wait. Yep. I need a copy for me too. Somebody says on the website, they asked ?
Yes, on the website. There's a thick section called books, a tab.
Ooh, there you go.
There you go. Buy it for your students. Teach it in your curriculum. Teach Latinx artists in your curriculum.
Thank you.
So thank you for spending the time with us, Jasminne. It's been absolutely delightful.
Thank you. This has been fun. This is great. Thank you so much.
All right. That was a phenomenal conversation. I feel so full.
Yeah. No, I'm hungry. I'm not full.
I feel full in my heart, and that's just part one of 5-part Latinx History Month.
That's true.
So Eddie, now for real, not for play,
for real, not
who's coming next week?
I looked at the calendar this time, to confirm it instead of just going off the dome. And there's problems with the dome sometimes, but if you've ever wandered over into YouTube to the Deaf Poetry Jam from back in the day and seen this poet do this fire piece called "This Is a Suit," which was one of the first pieces that really just like got me going, got me like to like yell yeah back at the television or at the computer screen when I was watching it. Joaquin Cihuatanejo will be with us next week to talk about all of his stuff.
All the things. All the things. Artist, writer, activist, educator.
Everything.
All the things. So we are so excited to have that as we continue to celebrate Latinx/Hispanic Heritage Month here in the diaspora. Whatever it is. We can have a debate about language in the coming weeks.
Latinx versus Hispanic Heritage Month. I wanted to ask her that, and now I'm gonna have to save it for the next poet.
For the next one, yes. But that will be happening. If you want more information about the things that we are doing and what's coming up in the future, you can now follow Words and Shit on Instagram and Twitter. It is at Words and Shh. See what we did there? Sin querer queriendo. But Words and Shh on Instagram and Twitter. You can also follow Write Art Out on Instagram, WRITARTOUT, or the Blah Poetry Spot on Facebook as well. We have some amazing shows planned for you through the rest of the year. And of course, Write Art Out and Blah Poetry Spot do their own writing workshops and open mics. So to get more information, follow them.
We have lots of people who watch today who have not watched us before. Please come back, watch us every Thursday, and follow us on those social media sites to see what we're up to, because we're always bringing some great poets and having some great conversation.
And if you want to
join us,
and if you want to catch up on past episodes, they are available on our podcast.
Wherever you find your podcasts.
Wherever you get your podcasts. I listen to a lot of NPR podcasts, so I love that. Wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe us wherever you get your podcasts. Anywho, until then, that was Eddie Vega.
And that was Chivo Orduña.
Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, y'all.
Good night, everybody.